Let's do a recap before we get into answering our final question word, which is the how. We talked about the 5 W's: who, what, when, where, and why, and how each question word answers the details of a scene that we need as the actors or the performers to understand how exactly we want our characters to approach these scenes. Next, we're going to look at how to answer one more question, which is how. How is the character doing what they're doing? Or it is how the character goes about reaching their goal. It can also reveal how a character chooses to express their goal or how they feel in a specific scenario, or even how they feel as they're expressing their goal. The how is something that we can look at or hear and describe. We can tell by the how a character feels or their intention with what they're trying to do. While all the questions are important and work together, the how works really well together with the what and the why. Let's say more about that. So, if we see in a scene something is happening, right? Let's go back to our original example where Melo's making muffins for the marching band. The what is that Melo's making muffins for the marching band, right? So we can look at the way that Melo is making these muffins and use that to answer the how. But even better, if we understand why Melo is making the muffins, we have an even better chance of getting our point across. When we think about the how, many things can come to mind. It can be similar to how an adjective would describe a noun in some cases, but how we describe something or the characteristics of what we're describing is also known as the quality of that thing. Let me say more. I'm going to give us 2 examples. In our first example, the scenario is Thomas was sad because he missed the bus to the mall. So maybe Thomas had a movie to catch. Maybe Thomas wanted to get into a store before it closes, right? The second example would be Thomas got a new skateboard for his birthday. He was happy. Maybe Thomas loves to skateboard as a hobby. So these are our 2 examples. Now in the first example, we would probably expect to see some things that would tell us that Thomas is actually sad. We might see Thomas frowning. We might see Thomas maybe cross his arms because he's upset, right? We might also listen to Thomas's voice and be able to tell that Thomas is sad. Maybe Thomas is speaking in a low voice because he's sad, right? But what about when Thomas is happy about the skateboard? We might see Thomas smile, right? We might see Thomas jump for joy. We might even hear Thomas speaking very fast because he's super excited that he just got a new skateboard, right? So these are different ways that we can approach the how with the 2 examples that I just gave. And as I've been describing these are things that you can see with your eye or you can hear with your voice that give us or communicate to us how Thomas might be feeling in that moment and in those different moments. As I've mentioned, the things that we described are what we would refer to as physical qualities or vocal qualities. The characteristics of Thomas's voice in the 2 examples that we gave are the characteristics that we gave. The things that we described are what we would refer to as the physical qualities or the vocal qualities. the characteristics of Thomas's voice or the characteristics of Thomas's movement. There are so many different ways to go about the how, but in a simple way, we can think about this by dividing it into 3 different groups. Now, the 3 different groups that we're going to use to describe the how are time or speed, weight or effort, and space. Now let's look at each of these individually. With time or speed, we are just talking about how long it takes to complete a task. So let's look at that example of Thomas. Thomas is happy that he got a skateboard, right? So how fast is Thomas expressing this excitement? How slow is Thomas expressing this excitement? Is Thomas being fast or slow? Again, detail is very, very important. You can also use time and speed to look at the change between 2 different actions. So let's say Thomas is having a hard day at school. So let's say Thomas is having a hard day at school. Comes home, is dragging his feet. He just looks really tired. Shoulders are slumped over, right? But then he sees the gift box right next to him. And all of a sudden, his whole body starts reacting differently, right? You see some speed in his body. You see speed in his reaction. Whoa, he's surprised, right? So that change in speed can also tell us how Thomas is starting to feel about what he sees. And then let's say Thomas opens the box finally and sees it's a skateboard. Maybe Thomas might even be able to tell it's a skateboard by the shape of the gift, right? If he doesn't know, there might be some hesitation to open it, right? To just show that Thomas may be confused about what is in this gift box. And now Thomas finally opens the gift box, sees the skateboard, quickly looks up, gasps because he's excited, right? So many different ways that Thomas can show this excitement. But the speed sometimes tells us how Thomas feels about what Thomas is doing. Same thing as when you approach your character. When someone is sad, they might speak slowly because they're feeling low, right? Or they might speak fast, like we had mentioned before, or move very quickly. Each character is different and each character expresses themselves uniquely, just like how people are in real life. Let's move on to weight or effort. Now, this is basically asking the question, how much effort does a task require? We can think of weight and effort in terms of how heavy or light something is. With voice, it could also be talking about how light or soft a voice is, or how heavy a voice is. Whether it's rough, maybe the voice has more bass, right? Or what would it look like to, for example, push a heavy door? How much muscle would we need to push a heavy door? How much effort does it take to push that heavy door, right? So when we're talking about vocal qualities and weight and effort, how heavy is that voice? How hard is it to get the words out? With physical characteristics or physical qualities, how much muscle am I using to complete the task? What if I'm picking up a really heavy bag? I might even scream when I'm picking up the heavy bag, or shout, or something might come out, right? To just say like, this bag is super heavy and I need a little extra effort and my muscles aren't doing enough, right? So these are different ways that we can talk about effort and weight. And the very last one is space. How much space is a character taking while they are completing their task or their intention? Thinking about space can bring our mind to so many different things. When we talk about space, we can talk about, if we go back to our question words, right, the 5 W's. Remember I said the how works together with the what and the why? Now when we talk about space, we can talk about space when we're referring to the what, and also when we're talking about another question word, which is the where. Sometimes our space is really small, like again, if we're in an elevator, we're not going to necessarily jump up and down in an elevator, or I don't know, do something that takes up so much space in an elevator, right? Especially if there are people in the elevator, you don't want to hit anybody in the face. So you're not going to do anything that's going to, hurt somebody. You're also not going to scream in an elevator, because if there are people there, it's going to get loud and disruptive, right? So we can use space when we're describing the where. We can also use space while we're describing the what. Remember in our previous example, Melo is making muffins. But while Melo's making muffins, what would her body look like as she's making these muffins? Maybe the kitchen is small and she needs to squeeze through different things, right? Maybe her arms are really tight and close together because she wants to hold that muffin tray really well, and the muffin tray is hot, so Melo doesn't want to make any accidents, right? Different ways you can think about it. If the character is excited, we might see them spin around in circles, right? Using more energy, they might dance around if they're excited. Thomas sees that gift, and Thomas is super excited, so Thomas might jump and get excited, right? Or if a character is relaxed, you might see them just fall into their chair. They might even have their arms dangling all over the place. They might even have an arm up somewhere if there's something to rest their arm on, because they're relaxed, right? They take up more space. Their body takes up more space. Now, if the character is upset, if they're sad or angry, we might see their arms tightly crossed around their body like this, right? Or they might even want to be in a corner by themselves. And going into that corner is them saying, I want this small space to myself, right? So space can be the space around the character. It can be the space that the character uses themselves, how much space they're taking up. But also, we can think about space as how much, like when we're thinking of the vocal qualities, how much space is our voice taking up? If we have a friend that's across the road and we're trying to get our friend's attention, we're going to speak louder, right? We're going to speak loud, say their name loud and clear so that they can hear us. That is our voices using more volume and taking up more space. But if you're trying to whisper a secret to your friend, you're going to probably whisper, speak lower, right? In a low, soft volume. So your voice is not taking up much space. Now, let's go back to our example. And with our example, I think I'm going to give you all a chance to try this yourselves. Melo made muffins for the marching band the morning of their show as a gift for their hard work. Remember that the how comes from the why. So we know that Melo's making muffins because she Now, let's go back to our example. Melo made muffins for the marching band the morning of their show as a gift for their hard work. Remember, the how comes from the why. So we know that Melo is making muffins because she wants to give the marching band a gift and to show her appreciation. Now, how about you try to come up with different ways? So as an exercise, think of all the W words that we came up with, right? Answer those. We've already answered them together. And now think about how each question word might affect the how. Each approach to a character is unique. Each approach to a character is different, right? With all the W's, I believe that you will now be able to act out your own scenarios and communicate the scene or scenario in your best way possible. You can create this with your own way and in your own style, but make sure that each W is answered. The more detail, the better, and feel free to use your imagination.